Good morning. We have general questions. Question number 1, Jim Hume.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government how many additional accident and emergency consultants and nurses have been recruited under the Unscheduled Care Action Plan.
Cabinet Secretary Alex Neil.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is fully committed to improving unscheduled care in NHS Scotland and have invested £50 million across 3 years in supporting health boards to make sustainable improvements. This includes dedicated funding of £1.8 million to support recruitment of emergency medicine consultants to reduce pressures and improve access to decision support. NHS Board's local unscheduled care action plans also identify actions to recruit additional nurses, allied health professionals and support staff. I have been informed by health boards that the recruitment is fully underway. For example, NHS Greater Glasgow have informed me that they have successfully recruited 3 additional A&E consultants, and NHS Lanarkshire have recruited an additional 5.24 whole-time equivalent nurses to support improvements outlined in local unscheduled care action plans. The number of consultants working in A&E with the number of consultants has risen to 152 whole-time equivalent in June 2013, and that's a 100.6% increase compared to September 2006. Although statistics do not identify the settings in which nurses work, overall, we have increased the number of qualified nurses and midwives by 1,086.1 full-time equivalent since September 2006.
Jim Hume.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for the response. He will recall that the promise of additional consultants was intended to avert the crisis we witnessed last year with hundreds of patients waiting over 12 hours on trolleys to be treated. In June, we were promised 18, and today, I think you only mentioned 3 in the Glasgow area consultants. I presume there may be other, to serve Scotland's 35 emergency departments. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that 8 months on since the promise of more consultants and with winter fast approaching, the Government simply hasn't moved quick enough? And does he agree with the Deputy Chairman of the BMA in Scotland, who described his plans as nothing more than a sticking plaster?
Cabinet Secretary.
No, I don't agree with the Deputy Chairman of the BME in Scotland, because if you look at the unscheduled care plan that's been agreed with the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, and they helped devise the plan, there has been a huge increase in the number of A&E consultants, and we've got twice the number of A&E consultants we had when Hid's government was in power. And of course, we could increase that figure further if overall the Scottish Government wasn't facing a 12% slashing of our operational budget being imposed by his government in London.
Question number 2 from Hill Needy has been withdrawn. The member has provided an explanation which is satisfactory. Question number 3 from Bob Doris, question withdrawn. It has been withdrawn for understandable reasons. Question number 4, Lewis MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government what public consultation there will be on the proposed closure of Scottish Fire and Rescue Service control rooms.
Minister Rosanna Cunningham.
Throughout October and November, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service is meeting key stakeholders across Scotland who will be directly affected by the plans set out in the Strategic Intent document.
Lewis MacDonald.
I thank the Minister for that. Is she aware that over 1,200 people have already signed an online petition to save Aberdeen Fire Control, and that many people in the North East agree with the Fire Brigades Union that neither the highly trained control room staff nor anyone else has been properly consulted on the scale of these cuts to frontline services? If she will not instruct a full public consultation, will she at least agree today to instruct the Board of the Fire and Rescue Service to publish the criteria on which they will decide which further control rooms to close and which to keep open?
Minister.
Well, Lewis MacDonald knows perfectly well that these decisions will be for the Fire and Rescue Service itself to take. What they have announced thus far after a board meeting on the 26th of September regards the intent and no final decisions on any aspect have been made except the clear indication that Johnston is the one control room that will remain open. And of course, that was the control room for the old Strathclyde Fire and Rescue Service area. The rest of it will be subject to conversations that they will be having over October and November. And I understand that Lewis MacDonald has already met with members from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, so he knows that those meetings are taking place. I do understand that some people have concerns, but the progress that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service wish to make in respect of all of the strategic assets that they have is to actually improve the service to the public, and that includes the proposals that they currently are looking at in connection with the control rooms.
Sarah Boyack.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I also add my plea that safety issues are paramount in the criteria that are looked at by the fire service? I recently met with the staff in Tollcross Fire Station and was very struck by the regional knowledge, not just the local knowledge that they have from across Lothian and the borders, and with the particular issues in the capital city with tourism and knowledge being vital. I hope that safety is paramount and included in the criteria for consideration.
Minister.
Safety will always be the first and foremost thing that is in consideration in terms of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and the Chief Fire Officer very particularly is looking precisely at public safety when he is considering the decisions that have to be made by the board. And I do understand that members will all want to argue in relation to their own particular areas, but I do remind people that thus far, while the general intent has been laid out, the only control room that has been specifically mentioned is Johnston, and people will understand that is a control room that already deals with over half of all the emergency calls in the whole of Scotland. So we have one control room dealing with half of all the calls, over half of all the calls, and we have 7 other control rooms dealing with the remainder of the calls to a greater or lesser extent. And it is precisely issues of safety that are driving this look at the future for control rooms in Scotland.
Question number 5, Christian Allard.
To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to encourage people to buy locally and to eat Scottish fish.
Cabinet Secretary Richard Lockhead.
The Scottish Government is working with the seafood sector to deliver a range of activities that seek to encourage people to eat Scottish fish. These include the Eat More Fish campaign, first launched in 2009, and ongoing initiatives such as the Seafood in Schools project, which aims to teach school children where seafood comes from, and the Eat in Season campaign, which also has a strong seafood focus.
Christian Allard.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. As an MSP representing the North East and having worked more than 20 years in the Scottish fishing industry, I want to see sustainable fishing communities thriving in the future. Will the Cabinet Secretary join me in asking everyone, seafish included, to get behind the label and trust Scottish fishermen, processors, chefs and fishmongers who are responsible for bringing Scottish fish to our plate?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, and I have no doubt that Christian Allard's healthy glows down to the amount of seafood he eats each and every week. But of course I do agree with Christian Allard, and we should get behind our fishing industry from net to plate. And Scottish seafood is healthy, it's tasty, and of course it's increasingly sustainable at the same time. And we have to indeed talk up the health benefits, especially given I'm sitting next to the Health Secretary, because fish is packed with healthy essentials such as protein, minerals and vitamins. And oily fish is also rich in omega-3, which has been shown to help protect against coronary heart disease. So by eating at least 2 portions of fish a week, consumers can get a major health boost, as well as supporting the fishing industry. And finally, I'm sure the Chamber want to join me in congratulating Roy Brett at the Ondine restaurant in Edinburgh, which recently won the Best Scottish Restaurant at the British Hospitality Awards. Ondine is, of course, a seafood restaurant, so more and more people in Scotland, visiting Scotland, are enjoying Scottish seafood.
Jamie McGregor.
Thank you. Will the Minister encourage Scottish consumers to buy only Scottish and EU caught mackerel products and boycott Icelandic and Faroese caught products, giving their unilateral and unsustainable pillaging of mackerel stocks?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as the member will be aware, the scientific advice for the mackerel stock, which is the subject of international dispute at the moment, was issued just last week, and actually shows that there has been a healthy improvement in the mackerel stock, despite the overfishing by some countries referred to by Jamie McGregor. Hopefully this provides us with a window of opportunity which will allow the international dispute to finally be settled in the coming weeks and months. A lot of sensitive issues there have to be negotiated, but of course I do encourage all Scottish consumers and from elsewhere to enjoy the fantastic mackerel landed by the Scottish fishermen, which again is healthy and tasty.
Question number 6, Alison McInnes.
Thank you very much. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service regarding the planned closure of control rooms across Scotland.
Minister.
The Scottish Government has regular meetings with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and indeed I personally met them as recently as last Thursday morning. Decisions on the allocation of its resources, including control rooms, is a matter for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Board.
Alison McInnes.
I thank the Minister for her response. The report, which the Fire Board believes supports the proposed closures, is based on the premise that the new nationwide service will allow for support estate rationalisation and the realisation of capital returns and reduced revenue costs. But what the report doesn't recognise is that the staff taking 999 calls in control rooms across Scotland are delivering a frontline service. Last week, I visited the Under Threat Fire Control Room in Aberdeen, and the staff there boast years of experience and a wealth of local knowledge. This enables them to quickly get a grasp of an emerging incident and best direct resources to where they are needed. Does the Minister recognise that fire control rooms are therefore not typical backroom assets and that they cannot be flogged off without impacting upon the service that they provide for the local communities? And is it right that these closure decisions are being made on the basis of a property management report?
Minister.
Can I just suggest to the member to use phrases such as flogged off in respect of a decision-making process by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Board and Chief Officers is frankly not acceptable in my view. The fact of the matter is that they have to look at the strategic assets that they inherit from 8 different services, and that includes 8 different control rooms. Now, I've already indicated to this chamber that one of those control rooms, Johnston, is responsible for more than half of all the emergency calls that come in across Scotland. Is the member suggesting that that control room cannot handle that work, because it has in fact been doing so over a large number of years? Of the remaining 7, one of the control rooms that we're talking about handles an average of only 4 calls per day. And it is quite proper, I believe, that the Fire and Rescue Service look very carefully at the provision that is being made in respect of control rooms, and safety is paramount. One control room, the one that is only dealing with an average of 4 calls per day, is at the limit of its IT capability and viability. Those are all safety issues which are currently confronting the Fire and Rescue Service, and it is absolutely right and proper that that safety concern be at the forefront of what they are doing in respect of control rooms. To suggest anything other is in their minds is quite wrong.
Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As control rooms are only one aspect of the Fire and Rescue Service, and as activity pattern of demand for call centres has changed, is it the case that reconfiguration could lead to improved public-facing services and more jobs in the Aberdeen area?
Minister.
The member is right to flag up, in my view, the wider issues in respect of this, but also makes an important point that actually what is being looked at the moment does not affect the outward-looking public face of the fire service. The public will not see any change. When an emergency call comes in, the same appliance will be sent out from most likely exactly the same fire station as previously, with the possible exception of the improved service that will come from there no longer being boundaries, which is something that I think people need to take into consideration. But those safety issues, as I indicated, are at the forefront, include the issues of the fact that we currently have 5 different IT services across the 8 control rooms, which does make it almost impossible to work as one, which is the big advantage in terms of safety that would come out of the new system. But the member indicates and raises the issue about the broader range of services that are going to be made available throughout Scotland and will be available to Aberdeen as the decisions are made about the full range of assets that are currently available and where they will be placed. And I would ask all members to engage directly with the board members who will be coming out to speak to them in their areas, but also to the Chief Fire Officer and the various hub commanders that they will relate to themselves, because they will get a better understanding and idea of the possibilities and improvements that may be available in their area.
Question 7, Mark MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with Aberdeen City Council regarding the timescale for improvements to the Hadigan roundabout.
Minister Keith Brown.
Barney Crockett, leader of Aberdeen City Council, last Thursday to discuss the timescales for the Hodigan improvement.
I thank the Minister for his response, and I note from the coverage that the City Council has agreed to follow the Scottish Government's timescale, which will be welcomed by my constituents in Middlefield, who were concerned at the impact that the Council's proposed 2-year timescale would have on them. Is the Minister aware of comments by Councillor Willie Young, convener of Finance at Aberdeen City Council, threatening to withdraw Aberdeen City Council from the project and remove it from the regeneration of Middlefield unless he receives what he describes as a written contract on the Hadigan roundabout? Can the Minister advise if that reflects the discussions he had with Barney Crockett?
Minister.
Well, first of all, what I made clear to Barney Crockett is the same position I made clear to Richard Baker, Lewis MacDonald, Mark MacDonald's predecessor, Brian Adam, and in numerous public statements our position in relation to Hodigan. And I've said that the Scottish Government will pay proper compensation for any households affected. We've already started the design work for the Hodigan at a cost of around £3 million. And I had what I thought was a very constructive meeting with Barney Crockett on a range of issues where the Scottish Government and Aberdeen City Council can work together. Unfortunately, as seems to be the pattern in these meetings, as soon as Councillor Willie Young heard about the fact that there was some constructive dialogue between the Council and the Government, he got very agitated. He then responded by saying that he would want to try and create this drama out of a non-existent crisis. And perhaps the best thing that could happen in this circumstance is if Councillor Willie Young lets the leader of the Council, Councillor Crockett, undertake the dialogue with the Scottish Government and enters into a period of silence for everyone else's benefit.
Richard Baker.
Every year of delay to this project costs local business in Aberdeen tens of millions of pounds each year. So when will the Minister submit a planning application for this route? How long is it all going to take? And what's the problem with giving a legally binding commitment for the Scottish Government to meet the costs? Why can't the Minister do that?
Minister.
Well, if Mr Baker wants to look at the procedures which have to be followed in terms of when you purchase land, when you make legal commitments, and also how you can possibly try and avoid protracted legal cases, as in the case of AWPR, he will understand why we're taking the same approach that was taken by previous administrations. If we commit, for example, to give compensation to households that we don't intend to take over, then that would be a thing which could be held against us at the public local inquiry. And I'm determined that we'll approach this in the correct way. Hodigan will happen as soon as AWPR is complete, and the Council himself have accepted that in their own engineer's report. That's the right way to do things. I thought Richard Baker had accepted that position. Barney Crockett has accepted that position, and perhaps it's time for the Labour benches to do likewise.
Question number 8, Graham Day.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what progress it is making on promoting climate justice.
Minister Paul Wheelhouse.
The Scottish Government yesterday hosted a groundbreaking international conference on climate justice in Edinburgh, addressed by Mary Robinson, President of the Mary Robinson Foundation for Climate Justice, international businesses and NGOs, the United Nations Environment Programme and UNICEF. The conference welcomed Scotland's leadership and highlighted the need for more collaborative working between governments, NGOs, businesses and communities. And the Scottish Government will build on the excellent work being done by Scotland's 2020 Climate Group to encourage and nurture these partnerships. The First Minister announced a doubling of funding for our Climate Justice Fund, which is currently supporting 5 water-related climate adaptation projects in Malawi and Zambia, with a further £3 million, which will again be additional to Scotland's commitments on international development funding.
Graham Day.
Thank you, and thank the Minister for his response. Can the Minister set out further to yesterday's Climate Justice Conference what opportunity the forthcoming UNFCCC talks in Warsaw will provide to further progress this important issue?
Paul Wheelhouse.
Well, Scotland is at the forefront of world thinking on climate justice, and we're building on trust between developed and developing nations. Climate justice reinforces, I think, the economic case for a swift and sustainable transition to a global low-carbon economy, delivering jobs, investment, trade, growth and equitable sustainable development. But climate justice also provides a platform for a new, inclusive and progressive agenda, building on existing actions by governments, businesses on climate change, human rights and sustainability issues. And these are the messages from Scotland that I will take to UN SCCC Summit in Warsaw in November in support of international efforts to try and bring about a secure and ambitious new global climate change treaty in 2015. It's crucial that that we get that agreement, given the context of the IPCC report on the impact of man on climate change, and determined, as were those at the conference yesterday, to take forward that message and make sure that we try and bridge the gap between the developed and developing nations and reach an agreement which is badly needed.
Thank you. We now move to First Minister's questions.